Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are very pleased to share with you different stories about love and betrayal from around the world. So now let's begin today's story journey. Being married to a waste like you is the biggest mistake of my life, Celeste announced loudly at the family gathering, the crystal wine glass dangerously swaying between her slender fingers. I think about divorce every day. The air in the dining room froze. Celeste's parents, sister, and brother-in-law all turned to me, their faces bearing that expression mixing pity and contempt. This wasn't the first time, but never so publicly, so cruelly. In the spacious Parisian apartment dining room, under expensive crystal chandeliers, I became the laughingstock in everyone's eyes. I just smiled and nodded, then said in an incredibly calm voice, "What a coincidence." Celeste frowned, clearly disappointed with my lack of reaction. What was she expecting? Begging? Anger? Tears? But after 15 years of marriage, I had mastered the art of burying emotions deep inside. "What do you mean, Etienne?" she demanded, a dangerous light flickering in her eyes. "Nothing," I answered, elegantly cutting the barely touched foie gras on my plate. "Just a coincidence." The rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence, occasionally broken by Celeste's sister's deliberate attempts at conversation. I didn't say another word, just smiled, ate, drank, as if in a carefully choreographed performance. That night, Celeste didn't ask about my response. She was either blinded by her own anger or too satisfied with finally having publicly humiliated me. We returned to our apartment in the Montmartre district, each silently preparing for bed. Outside, the Eiffel Tower's lights could be seen from our bedroom window, twinkling in the night sky. Once, this sight was a witness to our love. Now, it remained only as a cold contrast. You see, I am an architectural restoration expert, specializing in restoring the delicate stone sculptures and wooden decorations in many of Paris's historic buildings. My work requires patience, focus, and a keen eye for detail. These qualities also made me an observant husband, though Celeste clearly thought me both dull and stupid. For the past 8 months, I had been collecting evidence, documenting Celeste's betrayal, while pretending to know nothing about it. I watched as she gradually changed from the woman I deeply loved into a stranger, someone who viewed our 15 years of marriage as a burden. I first noticed the change last autumn. Celeste worked as marketing director at a top luxury company in Paris and had always been proud of her work. But suddenly, she began to speak dismissively of our life. Our apartment in Montmartre was suddenly too small, and my work restoring historic buildings became manual labor without vision. Initially, I thought this was just a midlife crisis. Until one night, I received a call from Marcel, the cafe owner. I often went to his cafe for coffee because it was near the Sacré-Cœur Basilica I was currently restoring. "Etienne, is your wife all right?" he asked, with unnatural caution in his voice. "Of course, why do you ask?" "Nothing. Just saw her earlier with a man by the river terrace. They looked intimate. I thought perhaps it was a colleague or cousin." I thanked Marcel and hung up. That night, Celeste claimed to have worked late at the company. This wasn't the first time. In the past few months, instances of working late and client meetings had increased dramatically. From that moment, I began to pay attention, not frantically searching her phone or tracking her whereabouts. That's not my style. I just started recording inconsistencies. Dates, times, places, excuses. I even hired a private investigator to track her movements and collect video and audio evidence of meetings. While restoring Sacré-Cœur, I discovered structural damage overlooked by previous restorers. Unless repaired, it would eventually lead to the entire dome collapsing. I realized my marriage was similar, outwardly gleaming but rotting at its core. The difference was, this time, I wasn't going to fix it. I would let this false marriage completely collapse, exposing the hidden ugly truths to the sunlight. My daughter Sophie was the only factor that made me hesitate throughout the process. At 14, she was sensitive enough to detect the tense atmosphere at home, but not old enough to understand the complexities of the adult world. She was more like me, quiet, observant, fond of art and history. Celeste always complained that Sophie should be more outgoing, participate in more social activities, rather than following me to visit those old buildings. If Celeste's betrayal was an injury to me, her neglect of Sophie was unforgivable. As her relationship with that mysterious man deepened, She spent less and less time with Sophie. Piano recitals, school events. Celeste always had something more important. Dad, why is Mom always so busy? Sophie asked me one evening as we sat on the sofa watching her favorite history documentary. The adult world is complicated, dear. I answered, not having the heart to tell her the truth. Some people need to prove their worth through work. But you don't need to, right? She said, leaning on my shoulder. No, I don't. I kissed her forehead. Because I already have the most precious treasure in the world. Through the private investigator's investigation, the identity of the mystery man soon emerged. He was Rafael, a Portuguese businessman who owned an expanding boutique hotel chain. Celeste's company was responsible for his brand promotion, but clearly, their relationship had gone beyond the professional realm. Further investigation revealed that this relationship was not just a simple affair, but involved business interests and possible financial fraud. Rafael was a few years younger than me, tall, always dressed in custom suits. The son of Portuguese immigrants, he had rapidly risen in Parisian social circles through keen business acumen and social skills. According to my investigation, his relationship with Celeste began 6 months ago at a brand promotion meeting. I could have exposed the affair immediately, but I decided to wait. I wanted to gather more evidence, ensure my revenge would be thorough and devastating. Just as restoring an ancient building requires time and patience, so does a well-planned revenge. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Through my friend in the legal field, Jean-Paul, I learned that the funding sources for Raphael's hotel expansion were problematic. More shockingly, the marketing services Celeste's company provided for his hotels were priced far below market rates, and many services had no official records at all. This was not just infidelity, but a double betrayal of professional ethics and the law. Weeks of investigation revealed more shocking details. Celeste used her position to benefit Raphael, not only providing discounted services, but also misappropriating company resources for his projects. Meanwhile, Raphael wasn't just emotionally exploiting Celeste, but economically as well, making her a tool for expanding his business empire. This isn't just a simple affair, Jean-Paul said after reviewing the collected evidence. This involves serious professional misconduct and financial fraud. Does your wife know what she's doing? She's too smart not to know, I answered, my voice filled with calm anger. But she's bewitched, immersed in a game of power and desire, completely disregarding family and professional ethics. I directed the private investigator to collect further evidence, including photos and recordings of their meetings in various places. But the most damaging was the financial records I found, proving how Celeste systematically abused her position for personal and Raphael's benefit. These records could not only destroy her marriage, but completely ruin her career. I consulted Sophie's psychologist about how to protect a child in such a situation. The psychologist advised me to stabilize Sophie's emotional environment before taking any action and ensure she knew that whatever happened, it wasn't her fault. Your daughter needs stability and honesty, she told me. But she also needs to know the complexities of the adult world. Don't lie to her in the name of protection. So, the day before that family dinner, I sat down to talk with Sophie. I need to tell you something about your mother and me. I began, my tone firm and calm. Our marriage is ending. I've decided to file for divorce. Tears immediately welled up in Sophie's eyes, but she nodded. I knew this would happen. I've heard Mom making secret calls at night, and she's always texting, even during meals. You're more observant than I imagined, I said, feeling a mixture of pride and sadness. I want you to know that whatever happens, this is not your fault, and I will never leave you. Mom betrayed you, didn't she? She asked, her voice almost inaudible. I was silent for a moment, then decided to be honest. Yes, but some details are not appropriate to discuss right now. What's important is that I will protect you and ensure your life remains as stable as possible. I didn't tell her the specific details about Raphael or my planned comprehensive revenge. Some truths are too cruel, even for a mature 14-year-old girl. Now, on the night of this family dinner, after Celeste had publicly humiliated me in front of her parents, I knew the time was ripe. When we returned home, after Sophie went to bed, I completed the final preparations in my study. The documents were ready: divorce application, property division proposal, request for full custody of Sophie, a detailed collection of affair evidence. and a whistleblower letter exposing Celeste's professional misconduct and financial fraud, ready to be sent simultaneously to her employer and industry regulators. All these materials, plus exhaustive supporting evidence, would be delivered to Celeste's office by a court server tomorrow afternoon. Timing was crucial. Tomorrow morning, Celeste would present the annual marketing strategy report to the board, the most important presentation of her career. As she basked in the peak of professional achievement, the court summons and whistleblower letter would arrive simultaneously. A perfect, dramatic moment that would brutally pull her down from the clouds at her most triumphant moment. Lying in bed, listening to Celeste's steady breathing, I contemplated the coming storm. 15 years ago, when we fell in love, we were sincere. We married in a small church in Montmartre, dreaming of the future. Sophie's birth brought us endless joy. We were happy, or at least I thought we were. But Celeste was never truly satisfied with the life I provided. She always craved more excitement, more social recognition, more material enjoyment. Raphael appeared, seemingly offering all this, while actually just using her for business benefits, though she was too foolish to see through this. Did I hate her? No. Hate is an intense but fleeting emotion. What I felt for her was a cold, enduring contempt and determination to make her pay for her choices. I wasn't just ending this marriage, but completely destroying the false life and career she had carefully constructed. This wasn't impulsive revenge, but precisely calculated justice execution. Tomorrow, everything would change. The court summons and whistleblower letter would hit Celeste's carefully arranged professional and private life like precision-guided missiles. Her career, her reputation, her affair, her relationship with Sophie, all would collapse in an instant. I had ensured through my legal team that this process would be irreversible, leaving no room for her to escape deserved punishment. I closed my eyes, imagining tomorrow's scene, feeling a calm satisfaction. This wasn't just about revenge, though that was an important part. It was about making betrayers face consequences, about creating a future for myself and Sophie without lies and betrayal. Outside, the Eiffel Tower's lights had gone out. Paris had fallen into the tranquility of night, and I could finally sleep with determination, knowing that tomorrow, when the court summons and whistleblower letter were simultaneously delivered to Celeste's office, she would truly understand what I meant by what a coincidence. I not only knew of her betrayal, but had prepared a perfect plan to make her pay the full price. When the morning sunlight filtered through the curtains into the bedroom, I was already awake. Last night was the best sleep I'd had in months, because I knew today would be the perfect execution day of my revenge plan. Celeste was still sound asleep, still immersed in her false world, completely unaware of the coming storm. I quietly got up, avoiding waking her, beginning this extraordinary day. Sophie was already preparing breakfast in the kitchen, which had become our recent habit. Since declaring she wanted to learn cooking on her 13th birthday, we had been preparing a sumptuous brunch together every Sunday. Today, she was fiddling with the waffle maker, a look of concentration on her face. "Good morning, artist." I smiled as I entered the kitchen, kissing her forehead. "What's today's creation?" "Blueberry waffles with homemade cream," she answered, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "And your favorite espresso." We completed breakfast preparation together. When Celeste finally appeared in the kitchen doorway, she looked completely ready for her big day. Perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, tailored suit. She had no idea that this day she had been looking forward to, the career peak day, would turn into the darkest moment in her life. "I have a board meeting today," she announced, as if we didn't know. She barely glanced at Sophie, just added sugar to her coffee. "Don't wait for me for dinner. I might be back very late." "Good luck, Mom," Sophie said sincerely, placing a plate of waffles before Celeste. "I made breakfast for you." Celeste looked at the plate, then picked up her phone. "Thank you, dear, but I have to hurry. Today's a big day." She kissed Sophie's head, nodded to me, then left, leaving Sophie and the untouched waffles. The speed with which Sophie's expression changed from disappointment to acceptance broke my heart. This had become commonplace for her. "Don't worry, dear," I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. "This means we can share more delicious food." She forced a smile, but I could see her hurt. "Dad, why is Mom always too busy to eat with us?" I took a deep breath, knowing today was a day for honesty. Sometimes, adults get lost in things they think are important: work, social life, status. They forget what truly matters. Things like family. Exactly. On the way to dropping Sophie at school, I explained that there might be some changes today, but I promised to pick her up after school. "What's happening, Dad?" she asked, keenly sensing the difference in my tone. "Today I need to resolve some issues," I answered, trying to remain calm. "About me and your mother. But whatever happens, I'll make sure you're okay. That's my promise to you." She nodded, her eyes showing understanding beyond her years. At the school gate, she hugged me tightly, longer than usual. "I love you, Dad," she said. "No matter what happens." "I love you too, my little artist. No matter what happens." After Sophie disappeared through the school gates, I called Jean-Paul. "Everything ready?" I asked. "All arranged," he confirmed. "The court server will arrive at her office at 2 o'clock, right after the board meeting ends. We've also contacted the company's legal department. They'll receive copies of the relevant documents at the same time." "Thank you, Jean-Paul." "Etienne, are you sure this is what you want? This will be a storm." I looked at the autumn Parisian sky, bright and clear. Storms are sometimes necessary. They wash everything clean, allowing new life to be reborn. I drove to Sacré-Cœur, where the restoration work was nearing completion. In the past few months, this project had become my haven, a place to focus on the work at hand rather than thinking about the collapse of my family. Marcel waved to me from his cafe. "Looking good today, Etienne," he called out. "Yes, today is a special day," I answered, walking into the cafe. "How about an espresso?" We chatted for a while, mainly about the weather and his business. Then, lowering his voice, he said, "Saw her again yesterday. With that Portuguese guy? At his new hotel." I nodded, not surprised. "Thank you for your concern all along, Marcel. But after today, this information will no longer matter." He gave me a puzzled look, but kindly didn't pursue further. I worked at the cathedral for a few hours, focusing on restoring a particularly delicate gargoyle sculpture. It was therapeutic, creating and restoring things with my hands, knowing that in my personal life, I had chosen a different path. At noon, I received a text from Celeste. Board presentation was a success. Raphael's new hotel project was unanimously approved. "We're celebrating at Le 5." This message wasn't meant for me. It was obviously mis-sent, meant for Raphael or one of her colleagues. But it confirmed everything was proceeding according to plan. She was basking in the joy of professional success, completely unaware of the coming storm. At 1:30 in the afternoon, I left the cathedral and drove to Celeste's company. I could have just waited for the results, but I wanted to witness it all firsthand, to see the moment her world collapsed. I found a seat in a cafe across the street, ordered a coffee, and waited quietly. Precisely at 2 o'clock, I saw the court's server enter the building. Simultaneously, another server arranged by my legal team, carrying the whistleblower letter and evidence materials, also walked towards the company building. 15 minutes later, my phone rang. It was my legal advisor. "Plan perfectly executed," he said briefly. She not only received the divorce papers, but the company also simultaneously received the complete whistleblower materials. "The board has called an emergency meeting." I took a deep breath, feeling a cold satisfaction flowing through my body. "Thank you for your assistance. Are you sure you want to go this extreme? This will completely destroy her." That's exactly the result I want. Shortly after hanging up, my phone rang again. It was Celeste. I let it ring a few times, then calmly answered. "You devil," she screamed, her voice distorted with anger and fear. "How dare you do this to me? Do you know what you've done? Just like how you humiliated me in front of family last night." I coldly replied. "Except I chose a more thorough method." "Thorough?" Her voice trembled. "The board has already suspended me. The police might get involved in the investigation at any moment. My career is over. Isn't that what you deserve? Selling out the company, the family, even your own dignity for Raphael's benefit." Silence on the other end of the phone. Then a voice of disbelief. "How do you know about Raphael? Have you been spying on me? Did you really think I would stand by like a stupid victim? I know everything. Every date, every rendezvous, how you systematically misappropriated company funds for his hotel's benefit. All of this is not only documented, but now simultaneously on the desks of the police, regulatory agencies, and your company's legal department." A broken sob came from the other end of the phone. "You don't understand. I thought he loved me. This was my chance to escape an ordinary life. Ordinary. My voice filled with icy contempt. We had a beautiful home, a talented daughter, decent careers. And you were willing to destroy all this for illusory excitement and status. You've taken your revenge too far. Her voice trembled. You've destroyed everything I had. That was exactly my purpose. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed Sophie too. By the way, she made waffles for you today, and you didn't even look at her. Another silence on the phone. Then she threatened, I'll hire the best lawyers. Don't think you'll get anything, much less the child. We'll see in court. You can try, but with this evidence, no judge would give a child to a professional fraudster. And if you want to know, Raphael has already been distancing himself from you. His hotel project has been approved. You no longer have any value to him. I hung up the phone, feeling a calm satisfaction that revenge had been completed. I didn't feel guilty for what I had done. This was exactly the punishment she deserved. The next few hours were full of dramatic developments. Celeste's lawyers tried to contact my legal team, but when they saw all the evidence we had collected, they immediately advised Celeste to accept all my terms. Meanwhile, Celeste's company's internal investigation quickly escalated. She was not only immediately suspended, but the company also indicated they would cooperate with possible criminal investigations. According to inside information, her business partners had completely cut ties with her and told the company they had been deceived by Celeste. When I went to pick up Sophie from school, I tried to control my emotions, but she immediately sensed a difference. What happened, Dad? She asked as soon as she got in the car. I took her hand and said directly and honestly, Your mother and I started divorce proceedings today. She did some dishonest things that hurt our family. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes, but she didn't show surprise. I guessed it. You won't forgive her, will you? Some betrayals cannot be forgiven. I answered, my voice decisive. She thought for a moment, then said, I'm sad, but I understand. Mom has hardly been home lately, and she's always texting. She's changed. I hugged her, proud of her insight and maturity. There might be changes in the coming period, but I promise to protect you and ensure your life remains as stable as possible. Will Mom still live with us? No, she'll move out. Legal procedures will determine arrangements for you to see her. My tone was firm but not harsh. I wouldn't prevent Sophie from contacting her mother, but I also wouldn't pretend nothing had happened in front of my daughter. I took Sophie to her favorite ice cream shop, trying to make the day less heavy. We talked about school, her art projects, future plans, temporarily avoiding the topic of Celeste. But reality couldn't be avoided forever. When we returned home, Celeste was already there, eyes swollen, makeup messy, looking completely broken. I need to talk to Sophie, she said as soon as she saw us, her voice broken. Sophie looked at me, and I nodded. You can, but I'll be nearby. As they talked in the living room, I stood in the kitchen preparing dinner, staying alert to ensure Celeste wouldn't say anything inappropriate to Sophie. Through the open space, I could hear fragments of the conversation. Why does Mom look so sad? Sophie asked. I made a big mistake, Celeste answered, her voice choked. I betrayed your father's trust, and now I have to face the consequences. Is it because of that person who always texts you? My hand stopped while cutting vegetables. Sophie's powers of observation far exceeded my imagination. Celeste was too surprised to speak. What have you seen? I've seen your phone screen and your photos. Sophie's voice was small but clear. I also heard you call him dear on the phone. Dad was in the studio then. Silence enveloped the room. Then Celeste began to cry, not controlled tears, but a real breakdown. I made an unforgivable mistake, she finally said. I hurt your father, and I hurt you. I have no excuse. Will Dad forgive you? Another silence. No. Some mistakes are too serious to be forgiven. And today I lost not only my family, but also my job and reputation. Dinner time passed in a heavy atmosphere. We sat together like strangers. Celeste barely ate, but she tried to control her emotions, attempting to maintain normal communication with Sophie. When Sophie went to take a shower, Celeste and I were finally alone. Your revenge was thorough, she said, her voice weary and bitter. This isn't revenge, but the consequences you deserve, I calmly replied. Not just divorce, but also career and social circle. You completely destroyed everything I had. She looked directly into my eyes, her voice trembling. You chose this path yourself. When you decided to betray our marriage while also engaging in professional fraud, You should have foreseen this outcome." She slumped in her seat, shoulders drooping. Raphael cut all contact with me today. Within an hour of the company receiving the whistleblower letter, he sent a lawyer's letter, claiming he was also a victim. I didn't hide the indifference on my face. Completely within my expectations. He used you, just as you used me. She shook her head bitterly. Do you really hate me to this extent? Not just ending the marriage, but destroying everything I have. I don't hate you, I said calmly. Hate requires emotional investment. I have only indifference and contempt left for you. You betrayed our marriage, betrayed Sophie, even betrayed your professional ethics. You deserve to bear these consequences. She looked at me shocked, as if truly seeing me for the first time. I never thought you could be so cold and ruthless. You never really knew me, I answered, just as I obviously never really knew you either. We briefly discussed the upcoming arrangements. Celeste would move out of the apartment immediately, and Sophie would continue to live here. Regarding visitation rights, I made my position clear. I won't prevent Sophie from seeing you, but only if she wants to see you and if your behavior doesn't negatively affect her. I might face a criminal investigation, she said softly, her eyes full of fear. I might lose everything. That's a result of your own choices, nothing to do with me. I calmly replied. I only care about Sophie's well-being. She nodded desperately. I messed up everything, didn't I? I didn't answer, just looked at her, my gaze containing no trace of sympathy or forgiveness. The next day, Celeste packed her personal belongings and moved out of the apartment. Sophie cried, but showed amazing strength. We'll be okay, right, Dad? She asked as Celeste's taxi drove away. Yes, my little artist. I kissed the top of her head. We'll be better than before. The following weeks were filled with legal procedures, property division, and custody negotiations. Sophie gradually adapted to the new reality with the help of a psychologist. Although I personally had no intention of forgiving my ex-wife, I fulfilled my promise, allowing Sophie to maintain contact with her mother under appropriate supervision. Raphael completely cut ties with Celeste, not only claiming to be a victim himself, but actively cooperating with the investigation, providing more evidence against her. This betrayal completely broke Celeste, but it was exactly the retribution she deserved. Betrayers eventually get betrayed themselves. This is an iron law of life. 3 months later, the divorce proceedings were smoothly completed, and I was granted full custody of Sophie. Celeste not only had her career ruined, but also faced industry association sanctions and possible civil lawsuits. Her former grace and elegance and professional success now lay in ruins. Although she tried to re-engage in Sophie's life, her reputation and financial situation were beyond recovery. As for me, I completed the restoration work on Sacre Coeur and began a new project, a small church severely damaged by fire. This new project symbolized our new life, rebuilding from the ashes, but never making the same mistakes again. A year later, on a spring day, I received a text from Celeste while working. Thank you for allowing me to see Sophie. Though I know you will never forgive me. I looked out the window, Paris shining in the sunlight. I didn't reply to this message. Our marriage was completely over, and there would be no reconciliation or friendship between us. For betrayal, I would neither forgive nor forget. But as Sophie's father, I had a responsibility to ensure she could handle this family change in a healthy way. Being married to a waste like you is the biggest mistake of my life, she had once declared in front of her family. Ironically, the marriage itself wasn't the mistake. The mistake was her choice of betrayal and deception instead of honesty and loyalty. I didn't reply to her text. Some wounds are too deep to heal. Some betrayals too serious to deserve forgiveness. My responsibility was to look forward, to create an environment for Sophie without lies and betrayal, not to try to repair an already completely broken relationship. As I put my phone back in my pocket, I remembered that family gathering night when I calmly said, "What a coincidence." That wasn't just about the coming revenge, but a declaration. I refused to be a victim of anyone's humiliation and betrayal. I chose to strike back in my own way, calmly, precisely, devastatingly. True revenge isn't about impulsive violence or loud condemnation, but about calmly making betrayers bear all consequences, making them lose everything they once cherished. In this storm, I found my strength, Sophie found the truth, and Celeste lost everything. This isn't a fairy tale perfect ending. but a realistic, cruel justice. In the ruins of betrayal, we must learn to accept a simple truth. Some mistakes are too serious to be forgiven. Some relationships, once broken, can never be repaired. Like those ancient buildings I restore, some damage can be fixed, but some destruction is permanent, and you can only tear down and rebuild. If this story resonates with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more excellent content. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.